This is a companion video for A413.Ex10 exercise 10. I received this screenshot from someone who was attempting exercise 10 and they were getting invalid objects for all their windows. And this is just using a model that I gave you, so that was confusing. I could just fix the model to where this wouldn't happen, but I don't want to do that. And so let me explain how this happened and how you can avoid this problem. And in the process, I think we'll get deeper into just how thermal zones are created in Climate Studio, which is the point of the exercise. So if I go, but here's the model I gave you. Oh no, that isn't it. Let me see. I've got a lot of models open here. This is it. This is the model I gave you. If I don't have any zones, it's as I provide it to you. If I just select, and these are, by the way, these are set up intentionally to be architectural spaces that can be directly turned into zones. They are volumes that are coplanar. In other words, or they have surfaces that are coplanar. There's no gaps between them. So and these windows are coplanar with the exterior the surface of the geometry. So this should work. I'm going to select all of these all this geometry. Maybe just get rid of the roof because that's not a thermal zone, right? Or can't be a thermal zone. Well, it's not a space. It's not an occupied space. I'm now going to. I'm just going to apply any old template because it doesn't matter. We're just trying to see how this works. So I created all those zones, and lo and behold, I do have this invalid objects problem. So, and if I look in wireframe, which is where we see what's going on with the thermal model, I basically get what we saw in that screenshot. If we see gray and we think that they're supposed to be thermal zones, we know there's a problem, and surfaces surrounded in red are invalid. Okay, so let's figure out what's going on with that, why this happened. So first I want to describe where this model came from. I created it from this model. And often what I do with these assignments or these exercises is I create them by thinking about what it is that we need to learn. I start modeling something, and then I test the lesson, and then I decide what I'm going to give you from that. So in this case, I was playing around. I created a model with a bunch of zones. I wanted to do an apartment building that was related to what we did in week 2. And you'll see that what I did was that initially the apartments are single zones, and then we have other non-occup or non-living spaces like the elevators are their own zones. There's mechanical rooms that are zones. There's a corridor, etc. Then I applied windows, coplanar to the thermal zones, and ran some tests. Decided what I wanted to do. Then I said, okay, you know what? I don't want them having to create. I didn't want you all to have to create your own models, so I decided to share this with you. And what I did is I deleted all the zones and windows, etc., and saved it as a different name. And so that is um, this model that we already saw. We have this problem with the invalid object. So why is that? What happened? So here's another version of that model. Let me see if I've got a bunch of these open. Let's see if this is the right one. Yeah. It's built slightly differently. It's the same geometry, but now if I select all these zones and turn them into thermal zones, so select all the geometry, turn it into thermal zones, I see that I get a functioning model with all the windows in place. And this is exactly the same model with a couple of simple adjustments. So what happened here? So the way Climate Studio, and they do, I've actually, I think it's a cool feature of Climate Studio is that if you have if you create some zones and then delete them and then come back and recreate them or use parts of that geometry, Climate Studio essentially remembers what you did before and says, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, I remember those. I'm going to put the windows back in and kind of give you a leg up, help you out with this." Um, but that can cause problems. So what's happening here is that as we rebuilt this, um, Climate Studio was confused about where these windows go. And let me show you why that's true. So the first thing I'm going to do is just delete all this. Get back to square one. If I let me turn off some zones and talk about what's how this is structured here. Okay, so I have these. Here's our apartments, right? And I've modeled these where they're both the full apartment as one zone or one polysurface, and then I've also modeled the individual rooms. I did that because if you look in the assignment, you are initially supposed to just create versions of those three templates we did last week and run them on the entire building, and then go in and start trying to look at, think about the building as different different thermal zones that might have different properties, and then apply different templates to different parts of the building and see what the effect is. And so that makes sense, right? So if we have a lobby, let me just turn the lobby on. This lobby is going to have a different thermal um, configuration or thermal properties than these apartments, right? There's going to be a different number of people in them, different types of mechanical systems. So as we get more into this, we're going to want to get more nuanced in terms of how we define these zones. So I wanted to give you that opportunity by letting you choose the full zone or eventually go back in and identify specific rooms. However, though, if I come in right now and I just select all of this, I'm selecting both the full apartment polysurface and the individual apartment polysurfaces for each room, and that confuses the model because we basically have two thermal zones occupying the same space. So we can't do that. So what you need to do with this model, I guess you could go in and you could just delete all these individual rooms if you wanted to. I don't suggest that, but that would solve the problem. That's what I did with the other model that worked without the invalid objects, just selecting all the zones. But the other way to do that is to come in and hold shift and select each individual apartment, but and leave out those individual rooms. So now and I'm just going to pick any template, doesn't matter because I'm just showing you how this works. Now if I create zones with those apartment geometries, it works, right? And so if I come now and I'm going to turn off the second floor, go to the third floor, and if I do the same thing here, holding shift, selecting the full apartment, create zones, we see that these also work. If I turn on the layers for the bottom, I can see them. By the way, if you turn layers on and off, we still the white and blue for windows is what we see in the thermal model. This shows us what's on in this particular thermal model right now. And I can also turn on the layers so I can see the outline to the geometry. It makes it clearer. And then if I just come in and add more zones, so for example, we'll do our stairs and storage and elevators. And so now we have, and I need to do the lobby also, so turn that on. So now we have the full thermal model. In this case, we don't have the windows applied yet. It's interesting. I've done this a couple times to troubleshoot this, and initially the windows were there. They remembered them. Um, so I'm not sure what's changed, but now I can go add windows. So let me do that. I'll come over to, just because it's easier to see, I feel. I'm going to add fenestration, add windows. I'm just going to use default glazing just because we're trying to make the point here. Um, and then, so there are my windows. I didn't add the one on the, I can just go and do that to make it complete. Now I got to select it. And so now we have our full thermal model, and there are no invalid objects at the bottom. And so we can run simulations as is, and you're supposed to in the assignment. And then you can also come in and say, well, wait, what about, and then now I'm going to go back to my other model. I'm doing this because I have named zones here. You'll see immediately why this is really helpful. If I say, well, I want to, I know that mechanical rooms are going to have a different um, thermal requirements, or they're going to be a different thermal reality in them than in an apartment, a living room in an apartment, that I can come in and edit those two zones, and I identified them because I knew the name, and I can look for a template that makes more sense to me. And so what I was saying in the another video, if you search for 90.1, because that's what we're saying is what we're using here, the way this works is that um, 90.1 is that standard that I told you about before. So these are just a series of settings that are designed to meet a certain standard. Um, and then we have different types of usage, like office or corridor, and the CZ is the zone. So we are in climate zone 4. So I would want to find, something that a zone that would be relevant to that space. So, we've got storage, we've got stair, we've got meeting, guest. So there's tons of different. Here's elevator, electrical, mechanical. Maybe we just use that one. So if I say electrical, mechanical, climate zone 4. Now these two zones here are have a different settings than the ones next to them, right? And by the way, I've actually already done that for this model. That's why these are all different. So that's why I set this up to where you could select these different rooms or these different spaces, not just having one large unit for each apartment. Remember that I also have, there's a ground boundary that we need to create the difference between surfaces that are touching air and those that are touching the ground. By the way, I have two in here. That's because this is also has house layers. And so that this red line right here is a ground boundary for the house, which was, part of that, a different assignment. Okay, so we've rebuilt this model without errors, and so you should be able to follow that protocol and or that workflow and do the same. I do have, by the way, there's shading here that I've added for these porches. So you could do that in your model also. There is a second portion to this assignment, so let's just go ahead and look at that. I've given you another model that's that medium office building. This one I've really simplified for you. I've created zones. So this comes with thermal zones and with these curtain walls. What I'm asking you to do here, though, is then just apply the three templates to the full building, so the old school, the current energy code, and the high performance. And then once you've run those, you are um, trying to change the geometry. So add shading and change the glazing material to get to a higher level of performance, or lowering your site UI, or even just seeing how things change. So let's look at this model just briefly. My point here then is that you're running the three simulation templates just to compare, like an old school envelope 1960s style to something that's kind of state of the art, to then trying to optimize, make it even a little bit better than that. And you don't need to change any of these internal zones. However, I would think that you should, these are coming from a 90.1. This is a standard layout for a medium office building. And the idea is that what's going on here? Why would we have these perimeter zones and then this large interior? Well, it's because of the sun, right? So the south, east, north, and west of this building are going to have, in the initial portions, like the first 15 or 20 feet in from the exterior envelope or the exterior surface, are going to have very specific exposures to sun. So they're going to have different daylighting requirements, or different daylighting. They're going to experience different amounts of daylight, and that's going to create different amounts of heat in these areas, which might cause our mechanical system to be completely different, or at least set completely differently for this zone here. Maybe it's probably easier if I do this zone here on the south than this zone in the north. And then our whole central area on each floor might have a completely different requirement in terms of HVAC. And definitely then that same zone on the first floor, where there's no sun beating down on it in the summer, will have a different, either we'll want a different kind of envelope for it, or it will have a different mechanical system requirements. So the point here is that there'd be reasons to delve into all of that, but we're not doing that in this assignment. All I'm asking you to do is run this as a single zone, a single type of zone for the whole building, and then add shading to try to tweak it, and change the glazing material to see what effects you create. Read the instructions, they're pretty clear. All right, hope that helps. See you in class.